lucky to have our folks from the Philadelphia Energy Authority here again. Actually, I was looking back at our agenda. It's been exactly 1 year since Lisa and Mary Rose came to speak to us about the Cpace program. So we'll let them, I won't steal the thunder, I'll let them explain what Cpace is. They're going to talk about that, as well as they're going to talk about some of the initiatives that they have in the city's new climate action plan. We should also give a link to that. It's worth perusing. If you don't know, the city has a climate action plan. So good weekend read. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mary. Mary Rose, you're going to be doing the presenting. So let me stop because the agenda and me notes aren't,
that sounds
invigorating.
Great. Let's see. All right. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
All right, excellent.
We're seeing not the presentation. Oh, there you go. There it is.
Okay, good. Excellent. Cool. Well, thank you guys all so much for having me and Lisa here today. We're so happy to talk to you. And I too was thinking like, man, when was the last time we were there? It was in person in 2020. So it had to be in January or February. So we're excited to update you on the Cpace program and what's been going on in the past year also outside of Cpace at the Philadelphia Energy Authority. I'm going to start off by talking about PEA, the Philadelphia Energy Authority, kind of from a high level, and then I'll go into the Cpace update and then cover a bunch of our other programs as well. And I realize there's going to be a lot to talk about here, so however you normally handle questions, I'm fine with. All at the end or during is fine. This slide is something that we like to talk about at PEA to kind of frame the problems that we're trying to address regarding energy insecurity. So I'm sure many of you are really familiar with these statistics. Pre-COVID, 1 in 3 children in the city were living in poverty. A quarter of the city was below the poverty line. We see that residents pay a ton of their income in their utility bills, and half of African-American households at any income level and 40% of renters face energy insecurity at least once a year. And energy insecurity means that they're giving up other really important things like food and medicine in order to pay for utilities, or they're living in unsafe conditions or temperatures or risk at utility shutoff. So these are some of the problems that we always have in mind when we're thinking about what we're trying to do here at the Energy Authority. So we here see energy as a tool for impact to address a number of those things that I was just mentioning. And I'm seeing now, I think you guys might be seeing my display with notes and everything. Is that right? Whatever.
No, we're seeing the presentation view.
Okay, good. Excellent. So we see energy as a tool for impact and work across a number of different sectors and programs to kind of drive impact throughout the city. Our major initiative is the Philadelphia Energy Campaign, which is a 10-year campaign designed to spur $1 billion of investment and create 10,000 jobs in the city. We're still tallying up our 2020 data, so I have just our data here from through 2019. But in the first 3 years, we got $136 million of investments in clean energy out the door and created over 1,300 jobs. Some of the kind of highlights from that work is a PPA that PEA signed to procure 22% of the city's electricity from a solar array out in Adams County, running the largest solarized campaign for residential rooftops in the country, enrolling tens of thousands of people in a water and sewer line protection program, which has saved residents of Philadelphia millions of dollars in repairs and also saves the water department money in repairs and provides efficiency to them in their water systems, so saves them energy as well. And we launched the Cpace program, which I will talk about more in a few minutes. I'm actually going to skip forward and do the Cpace update first and then come back and talk about PEA's programs. So I'm just going to jump here to the Cpace overview. So some of you may remember from our presentation last year, Cpace is a financing tool. It stands for Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy. And basically, it's a financing tool you can use for 3 different types of things in your buildings: energy efficiency projects, renewable or clean energy projects, and water conservation projects. The special thing about Cpace is that the repayment mechanism is done through a special assessment similar to a property tax assessment. So the assessment, the repayment is tied to the land, tied to the building, not tied to the owner. So that means that in the event of a building sale and a transfer of ownership, the repayment obligation actually stays with the property and goes to the new owner in the event of a sale. That has a couple of benefits from our perspective. The major one being that a lot of times property owners don't know how long they're going to be in their buildings and if they want to make an investment that has a longer payback period than their expected time of owning the building. But Cpace, because you can transfer that obligation in the future to future owners, kind of helps get around that, because it means that if you are going to be in your building for 5 years and you've got a 10-year payback period, you're only paying for that measure for the 5 years while you're there, and then the remainder just goes to the new owner. A couple other benefits of Cpace are, first, Cpace provides long-term financing up to 30 years per the state statute, but it's based on the weighted average useful life of what you're installing. Competitive rates in the 5 to 7% range is what we see kind of as an average nationally right now. One thing to note there is obviously that's not, interest rates are really low, and that's not as cheap as kind of, senior mortgage and senior debt right now. But Cpace can come in and be really competitive against mezzanine debt, or kind of reduce the amount of cash or equity somebody needs to put into a project. So that's where the rates become pretty competitive and compelling. Another nice thing about Cpace is that it limits the amount of upfront cash that's needed for a project. In fact, you can cover 100% of the hard and soft costs associated with the project for those 3 buckets I mentioned: renewable energy, energy efficiency, and water conservation. You can cover 100% of those costs with Cpace financing. So that's $0 out the door in year 1, and then you pay it back over time up to 30 years at these competitive rates. As a result of that financing structure, stretching it out over so long and financing 100% of it up front, a lot of times you can, the long-term payment means that each year you're not paying as much towards your Cpace financing as you are saving in your utility bills from your project. So the savings exceed the amount that you have to pay back, and it becomes a positive net income project from year 1. So I think I shared a graph similar to this last year. Cpace has been growing nationwide. The growth continues. It's really just rapidly expanding. Over $2 billion invested via Cpace in these energy efficiency and water and renewable energy projects across the country, and over 24,000 jobs created. A couple things to kind of note as you're thinking about whether or not Cpace could apply to any of the jobs that you're working on, and how it might bring some value to some of your clients. Cpace is actually a really great tool for building resiliency for your buildings, and from a cash flow perspective as a response to COVID-19. So the first point I have on here is related to the point that I was making before, which is that a lot of times these Cpace funded projects result in savings on your utility bill, and the savings exceed the repayment amount. So you kind of improve your cash flow year over year. The second point here is Cpace can actually be used for retroactive financing. So if you've completed a project that has Cpace eligible measures in the past 2 years, you can finance that or refinance it with Cpace and free up some cash or pay down more expensive debt, and kind of just improve the liquidity of your business. Third, this is something I feel like I'm preaching to the choir probably with this group, but addressing Cpace projects create these energy savings and inherently reduce the carbon footprint of the buildings involved, which creates a more resilient city. One thing I want to note here is that Cpace actually can be used for a lot of resiliency measures related to energy and water efficiency. And Lisa and I are working with a coalition of people right now who are trying to add indoor air quality measures to Cpace eligibility via an amendment to the state statute. We see a lot of logic with that, because indoor air quality measures would be permanently affixed to the building the way many of these things would be, and the repayment would be linked to the property. And it could create a lot of health and wellness benefits for the people working in those buildings as we look to return to work. Couple quick notes here on Philadelphia Cpace eligibility. So, Cpace was passed in Pennsylvania in 2018, and then each county has to enact its own program. We, the Philadelphia Energy Authority, run the program here in Philly. And so these are the rules for the Philadelphia Cpace program. If any of you work outside of Philly, there are some slightly different guidelines for the other counties that are active in the state. Happy to talk about those, and I included some information on that in the appendix, which we are happy to share. But this is just Philly. So, you know, really the program requirements are your buildings in Philly to participate in our program has to be a commercial and industrial property. Residential properties are not eligible. Multifamily properties are not eligible, but mixed use, the commercial portions of mixed use buildings are eligible. Another quick thing to note on that, Lisa and I are working with that coalition to add indoor air quality as a state to the state statute, and we're also working to add multifamily buildings because we see that as, you know, huge opportunity for energy efficiency investments that's carved out of the law right now. So you can use Cpace for a lot of different types of things: retroactive financing, gut rehabs, new construction. You know, in new construction projects and big gut rehabs, a lot of times Cpace is layered in with a number of other capital opportunities. You know, senior debt, any sort of grants or incentives, opportunity zone funding, historical tax credits, historic tax credits, new market tax credits. It's really, you know, can be part of a big capital stack. It's also very simple to use as, you know, straightforward financing for a retrofit to just cover all of the work being done in a retrofit. So it's a pretty flexible tool. We do say here that each Cpace project has a minimum of $100,000 for the financing. I think statewide, the minimum is actually $10,000. So outside of Philly, you can do much smaller projects with Cpace. Here are a couple of sample projects: energy efficiency, renewable energy, and water conservation. As I mentioned before, I'm sure you're all very familiar with the types of measures that would fall in those buckets, so I won't dwell too long on here, but we do have a full list of the eligible measures and projects in our program guidelines, which is all available on our website at philadelphiacpace.org. So what I really wanted to spend a couple minutes telling you guys about is that we actually here in Philly closed the very first, second, and third Cpace projects in the state last year. So I brought a case study on each of them to kind of walk you through what those looked like. And one thing that's really just really special about all of this is that each of the three projects that closed here in Philly really are different and have a different value proposition and a different way that Cpace was used. So I'm pretty excited to tell you about them. The first one here is the Met. This was actually closed kind of in the fourth quarter of last year, so it's the most recent one. And this was a retroactive financing. So like I was mentioning before, the owners looked to Cpace to improve the liquidity and pay down more expensive debt. When the Met had been renovated, they put in a bunch of energy efficiency and water conservation measures that are Cpace eligible. So they were able to refinance a good amount of the construction, $6 million, with Cpace last year. Here we've got J Centrale. So this is a great building. This is a mixed use building in Kensington being developed by Shift Capital. Some of you may be familiar with it. I think it's a pretty innovative building and model that they've got going on out there. And this was the very first Cpace financing that closed in the state. It closed for $1.5 million, and it was used for a bunch of different measures, mostly energy efficiency measures like LED lighting, window replacements, insulation, things like that. But also a little bit of water conservation related to low flow fixtures and plumbing as well. The great thing about this is basically they needed to find an additional source of capital to get their project fully funded and over the finish line. And by using Cpace and installing more energy efficiency measures, they were able to complete that project and realized immediate operating cost savings by exceeding these code requirements and installing these measures. And the third project we had closed here using Cpace last year was this Old City Day School solar project. So this is actually a preschool and other mixed use commercial building in the Germantown neighborhood that used about $550,000 of Cpace financing last year to cover a solar installation on the roof and the ancillary work required on the roof to improve the roof to make it solar ready. So that was some structural work in addition to installing the solar. 100% of it, including all of the soft costs, the engineering survey and all of that, was financed with Cpace. And the really cool thing is that this solar array was large enough to cover about 100% of the tenant's electricity needs. And the owner he was really excited about installing this. He saved some money from it, but he also really was excited to put solar on his roof to kind of, provide an example for the type of initiatives that he wants to see serving the next generation. And we thought that was a really cool way to kind of communicate solar being put on a daycare. So one thing that's really interesting to note about this is that the solar project kind of, simply with the tax benefits and the Cpace financing structure was able to be cash flow positive without accessing any sort of grants or any other types of subsidies. So it really worked with the tools that are available in the market without having to be subsidized at all. Okay, I have a bunch more information here on Cpace, but I'd like to kind of pause and see if there are any Cpace questions really quickly, and then I'll go back and kind of cover some more of the work that we here at the Philadelphia Energy Authority are doing. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask?
I'll jump in. I asked a question in the chat, but I had heard that Cpace for multifamily is making its way towards adoption. Do you have any updates on that? Have you heard that?
Great question. And sorry, I can't see the chat while I'm in full screen mode for some reason.
Oh, right. Yep.
But yes, that's a great question. So we are working with a number of other organizations to support an amendment in Harrisburg right now to amend the Cpace statute to allow multifamily buildings. It wouldn't be all multifamily. I think we're putting a size limit on there. The proposal right now is 10 units or more. But yes, we are very hopeful that that will make its way through soon.
I think I'd echo that too, of just like the really small scale, what would be the Cpace? Because I look at myself, somebody as a prospective home buyer, and I'm a person of privilege in the fact that I'm an architect and somebody caring about sustainability. And even I don't have the finances to do some of these things. And this is what I really want to focus on. So how is it so that we create programs that incentivize people unlike me who are not privileged with this knowledge or any sort of finances to make these really necessary upgrades to our homes?
That is such a great question. Okay.
Does this tie into the climate action plan, Mary Rose?
I was going to say, I am so glad you asked that because it tees up some of the information that I brought today. And so I'm excited to talk about 2 or 3 different programs that we have going on. But one quick thing that I want to note on that is that you mentioned Cpace, and Cpace and Cpace are really kind of fundamentally different products in a number of ways, because Cpace really is geared at these commercial owners who are kind of practiced, sophisticated borrowers. And Cpace, it works for some people, it works in some markets, but we've seen, unfortunately, like some pretty predatory behavior in that space. And so that's something that we have a lot of concerns about. And that's why we put kind of a threshold on the multifamily unit number in the proposal going forward right now, because we don't really, because there have been some predatory bad actors in that space, we think that it better serves people to keep them out of the market. So we're really just focusing on adding multifamily of a certain threshold to Cpace. But I think that we have a lot of other things we can talk about for your question, Jordan. Thanks.
Mary Rose, can I ask you a quick question about the retroactive financing?
Yeah.
How far back is someone able to apply for? So if they did energy retrofits, 5-10 years ago, where's the cutoff?
The cutoff is 730 days. So it's a 2-year look back. And it's a look back to your completion certificate, or if you have some sort of other formal documentation that gives you kind of like a stake in the ground of a date, we're willing to look at that other rationale as well.
And that's a rolling 730 days?
Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
I had a quick question. When you're thinking about Cpace, or allowing this for multifamily, let's just say that, is there a consideration for developers who primarily focus on scattered site development, like, or a lot of, a lot of the affordable housing realm, or just, some developers just focus on that. They'll do a 30-unit project, which really acts like a multifamily, but it's a number of sites that are singles, duplexes, triplexes, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I haven't gotten that before, so I'm taking it down as a note. So I don't think that that would be eligible. I mean, we'd have to look at the specific examples and all of those kind of things, but I don't think that a scattered site approach would be eligible for Cpace, even when the multifamily provision is added. I'm guessing one of the concerns would be that it would look like RPace, but another concern would be if it's kind of scattered site and, you know, like you were saying, like a duplex or a single family home, but it's all kind of owned by the same person. If they could be individually sold, then the assessment that you would place for the financing, it would be kind of scattered across a number of different properties, and that kind of defeats the underwriting logic of the Cpace product. So I don't think that it would apply in that case. But if you have a specific example, I'm happy to dig in and see if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That helps me to understand it. I think I was more thinking about long-term holdings that followed the same schedule as the Cpace financing. So it would be held by one owner. And, not to dive into the details, but the idea is that most of Philadelphia is scattered site, 500,000 homes. And so the idea of the push to retrofit these, everyone's talking about scaling this work up beyond just the big buildings or one small row house at a time. And so it makes me think that this kind of financing could be, or something like it could be ideal for that kind of work.
Well, I have another thing. I have another slide here that is better for that type of work. So I will.
Okay, thanks.
I'll talk about that. Yeah.
But it does make me think about community land trust and scattered site, and how you might have a different way of formulating the type of development that sort of conglomerates all this together into one unified thing, sort of going forward in perpetuity.
Yeah, exactly, David. Like I think about the work. I listened to a podcast yesterday about. Called How to Save a Planet, and they were talking about Block Power's work, and it was just really radicalized because it was just getting out of this mindset of doing one tiny little thing at a time and sort of aggregating all the debt together, similar to the way, securities-backed mortgages work, for lack of a better term. And it just feels like that could happen. How else are we going to solve the idea of whether moderate or substantial retrofit of millions of homes in the country, right? Yeah. So I know that's a complicated financial mechanism, and I don't pretend to know how that works out, but it just wanted to bring up the question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm so glad that you mentioned it, because we actually have a partnership with Block Power that I have in my slides to talk to you about. So Cpace really is not the right tool for what you're talking about, but it is definite. Like, you're talking about a problem that we're trying to address on a number of different fronts. And I love hearing you bring it up, because we're always trying to think of new ways to get at these issues. So yeah. I see the chat now is moving and grooving. I don't know if there are any questions that I haven't addressed yet. Lisa, thank you for addressing many of them there. Does anyone else have anything on Cpace?
And Lisa, we have AOS here on the call today as well. Paul is joining us.
Oh, good.
Yeah, Danielle and I are both here, but we were just messaging each other saying, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, Danielle, sorry. Duh, Danielle.
Yeah, that's something I've been curious about. What's the typical role you see the architects playing in this process?
I skipped over that slide, and let me go to it.
Do we know any architects, Bunny?
That's a great question. Thank you, Bunny. So the Cpace project has a number of different players in it. There's the owner of the building, the capital provider, like us, basically the program administrator, and the city. And that is an oversimplification, because really the owner works with so many different firms that kind of help make these Cpace projects come to fruition. So that's where I really see the role of architects coming in, is that working with your clients and working with these property owners to include energy efficiency measures, for example, and then bringing Cpace to them as a way for them to include it with $0 upfront cost. And I don't know how much, I'm guessing you probably don't get into too much of the you know, hey, if you install this, you'll save $10,002 a year. That sounds very specific for the upfront, but I think that having those conversations with your clients and your building owners is the way to. Cpace is a tool to help take those conversations from kind of the theoretical, like, hey, if you install this, we think we can save some money, and we think it's good for your carbon footprint. Cpace is the tool to kind of take it to fruition and say, hey, if you want to install this, here's a tool to do it. It covers 100% of the cost, and you bring in an engineer, like an engineering survey is required as part of the process, and that'll prove out the energy savings that you get and compare that to the amount that you're paying per year. So I would say the role of the architect is to think about how these measures can be included in the design, and then Cpace is the tool to help you pitch it and get those products included. And the reason I brought that up, the reason I put this slide up here is, you know, we have a two-stage application process. We require a pre-application for any project coming through in Philly so that we can screen it and just kind of make sure that it's an eligible project before people spend too much time on it. It's very simple, very quick process. And then people really go out and develop their project. And that here in this step 2 is where the bulk of the work really takes place. That's where you pick which measures you're going to be financing. You figure out how they interact with the building. You get an energy survey that tells you, you know, how much money you're going to be saving and what your carbon footprint reduction is going to be. And you work with your capital provider to figure out your financing. And once all of those papers come together, you submit a final application, we review and approve it, and then we place the assessment on the property, and the financing closes, and the project's implemented, and we move on. But really, you know, I see the role of the architects here in this step 2 of developing the project. Okay. Any other questions before I jump into some other topics? Oh my goodness, it's 8:30. Bunny, I just realized and David, I'm running way over on my time. How would you like me to proceed? We can cover all of the PEA stuff very quickly. We could come back another time and cover it outside of Cpace. What's best for you?
I think we could do a 5-minute overview.
Rapid fire.
If that's possible. We're eager to hear about this.
Okay.
And we would definitely welcome you back
Oh, yeah.
to go into more detail.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. I'm going to spend 30 seconds per slide here. Apologies for all the shortness. We work on a lot of different programs in a lot of different sectors. Here are the 8 major topics. I'm going to highlight kind of key recent work in each of these topics. So on the Solarize front, we run the nation's largest Solarize program. So far, we've gotten over 3 megawatts of rooftop solar installed across homes in Philadelphia, which is a huge lift when these are happening in tiny little, like 4 and 5 kilowatt increments. We're very proud of this, and we'll be launching a 5th round of it later on this year. One really cool component of our Solarize program is that some of the fees from the Solarize program help us pay for a solar savings grant program, which provides rooftop solar to low and moderate income households. We just installed the very first solar array on our very first LMI home a couple of weeks ago. This is kind of a complicated program that combines grant funding with homeowner loans and some fees from us, from our Solarize program. And solar for LMI homes has been a really tough nut to crack nationwide, and we're really proud to have figured out a model that works and it's getting us solar on people's homes. We also work on city buildings. One big thing that I want to highlight here is we're currently working on an LED street lighting RFP. The RFQ closed last year. When we replace all of the street lights with LEDs in the coming years, we're expecting to reduce the city's carbon footprint by 9%. Expect that RFP to come out later this year. We also work with the school district. A couple things that I want to highlight there are with the Guaranteed Energy Savings Act, we were able to do a whole bunch of work with the school district. We did a pilot program of 3 schools. In the pilot, the average energy savings was 38%, well exceeding expectations. Construction's almost done for our phase 1, which is 3 more schools. Construction's underway for 4 more schools, and we're scoping progress for more schools going forward. There's a new RFP out right now for a whole other phase of schools, starting with 3 and able to scale up to 20 to do energy efficiency and these guaranteed energy savings work. We're also really proud of this work and see it. You know, we talk to the school district a lot about pairing energy efficiency work with a lot of the remediation and kind of health and hazard work that they're doing in response to asbestos and other things. So happy to talk more about that. We also run a number of training programs. These are actually great models that other organizations are trying to replicate in their spaces as well. Bright Solar Futures is a high school CTE program that helps students learn how to be solar installers in school, and they graduate from high school able to do that, ready to go into the solar workforce. Opportunity Youth is another solar training program for 18 to 30-year-olds, and we just launched the Green Retrofit Immersive Training, GRIT, with the Energy Coordinating Agency earlier this year to help train people on energy efficiency jobs. This is the Build to Last program, is the way that we're helping get at a number of the energy efficiency needs in residential homes across the city. This is complicated. We could do a whole session on this, but basically the Build to Last platform is a coordinated services platform that layers in a whole bunch of different services that homes are eligible for via city programs and other services, things like weatherization, basic systems repair, you know, even pest and hoarding being addressed, adding solar, electrification, and kind of layers a whole bunch of different services together and does a coordinated financing and coordinated delivery of these services to a group of homes all at once to kind of get some economies of scale and efficiencies there. Here's an example of a number of the improvements as part of Built to Last. Our pilot program for that has been, we recently got a grant from William Penn Foundation. We're also fundraising for other money on that, and the pilot program is launching later this year. On small business, we do some work here as well. We've done some technical assistance work recently with the Curtis Institute, and we also have a new partnership with Block Maps, kind of mapping all the cultural institutions and multifamily buildings in Philly with all of the available data to identify opportunities for energy savings. We're going to be pairing that with some financing tools and outreach mechanisms that we're implementing later on this year to help get some more energy projects across the finish line. And the final thing I'll talk about is we also just recently incorporated PEA's Green Bank affiliate, which is the Philadelphia Green Capital Corp, which will be a financing platform to complement PEA's existing programs to kind of scale and amplify them with financing solutions that can help grow us towards our $1 billion, 10,000 job energy campaign goal. That was probably more than 5 minutes, but that's a quick overview of the big initiatives going on right now.
So Mary Rose and Lisa, do you guys have any upcoming workshops, presentations you're going to be doing on Cpace, as well as the PA initiatives linked to the climate action plan? I'm just thinking if you have other sessions that people can come and listen and participate in Q&As, it'd be great for us to get that information out to our group so they can come and continue this. Otherwise, we're going to need to dedicate probably an hour to each one of these topics and do a little Q&A afterwards.
I appreciate that so much. So we have actually, I think in April, we're planning to do kind of a PEA, like 90-minute overview of all the stuff that we're doing. So a much more detailed version of what I just did. So we would love to advertise that with you guys. And Lisa and I are constantly doing Cpace informational events.
Right, and we've instituted a monthly open meeting the last Thursday of every month, and so the next one is a week from today at 2 p.m. So we can forward the link to that event to you guys to distribute. All
right, that sounds good.
Cool.
Definitely conversations we need to continue to learn more about. It's great to see all this. So thank you
so much. We appreciate it. I'll stop sharing my screen now.
All right, so we have a little over 20 minutes